I'm Kevin Davis, and this is the Catholic Family Podcast. Thanks for being with us here. And thanks, as always, to a very good friend of the show, Father Stephen McKenna. And Father McKenna, as you all probably know, he's been on quite a lot recently, which is awesome for us. And he oftentimes, it's been a while since I've done a podcast, Father. I'm gonna have to get my mouth going again. But oftentimes, Father comes on to talk about kind of the stuff that no one else really wants to talk about, kind of the dirty stuff, the stuff that's kind of, you got to touch it a bit with kid gloves. And that's part of why we really appreciate Father that he is willing to do that and talk about things that are, they're important and also maybe a little bit touchy. And well, one of those things is very much in the news right now, and that is the issues with Israel and Hamas. And that's something that we actually have friends of ours that I know very well, that are good friends of mine, are actually stuck right now in Israel. They were visiting the city to visit the Holy Land, and well, unfortunately visited at the wrong time. So please, before we even get started and talk about the real purpose of the show, say a prayer for them. They're supposed to get out either today or tomorrow via the military. So pretty crazy stuff, Father. And I guess with that, how do you want to begin with this, Father? Do you want to kind of give a brief, overview of what's going on in Israel?
Sure. That'd be probably a good start. So on October 7th, this past Saturday, we all sort of awoke to the news that Hamas militants had breached the border of the Gaza Strip and had entered into Israeli territory and started to not only start engaging in shooting and killing Israeli citizens, but even taking some hostages. And moreover, a huge volley of rockets were sent from the Gaza Strip into Israel. And that's something that there's anybody who pays attention to the Middle East understands that these such occurrences are actually far more common than people want to pretend that than it is now. Right now, it's the hot button topic, and it is for good reason in some sense, because the scale of this was far greater than just small incursion in these things, but also that it is, but also that it's not unprecedented for. I mean, it's been 56 years or something like that since there's been this strife going on between Israel and Palestine, and that's sort of what happens when you have a completely religiously and ideologically different group come in and just seize your land and do that. That's not going to go over well, and it's going to cause problems in the long run. And I think we need to remember that. Now, dates mean things, and so it is interesting that the incursion took place 50 years and one day after the Yom Kippur War, which was the last really big battle between real big military engagement between Palestine and Israel that took place 50 years and an additional day. What is being said is that, and it probably is true, is that they waited the extra day, so it wasn't on the 50th anniversary exactly, because the one extra day put them on the Sabbath day for the Jews, and so that they could catch them with a little bit more of a relaxed attitude. But that being said, that 50th anniversary is important. But moreover, the date of that will be, I want to point to a different significance later on of that date as well, but don't want to get ahead of ourselves in that regard. But that is the significance to them and those two factions anyways is the day that it was just after the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War, and so there's this, and Israel has responded, doing airstrikes and rocket strikes of its own, back into Gaza, and all of this fighting sort of, the real, crazy part of that, all this fighting really takes place around a desolate wasteland, essentially. There's nothing, there's no resources there, there's nothing good there, there's nothing. It's desert, it's harsh, it's, there's it's just, it's not property you'd want to go buy and anything like that. But one of the main factors of it, and one of the reasons why it makes Palestine so angry, is that when it was partitioned off that way, it effectively blocked Palestine out from the sea, which is obviously a major asset to industry and to economy. And again, we're going back, 56 years or whatever it was to when that took place. But that's, in terms of history, geopolitical history, it's relatively short time frame, and especially in people who have, thousands and thousands of years of history. As Americans, we tend to get over, and this from being in Europe. People in Europe, their memories are long because they have so much time of history to look back at. We have so little history in America that our we forget about things very quickly.
Well, and my brother, sorry, Father, but my brother was in Afghanistan and Sudan in the Marine Corps. And he really mentioned that too. He said you could really see that in it as a cultural difference, that all of the people who've tried to conquer Afghanistan, especially, I mean, throughout thousands of years, it doesn't work. And in the US went in, Russia tried it too, and there just is a totally different mindset. As you say, there is this mindset of, I don't care. Yeah, I'll wait you out. We'll fight you for our lives and our sons' lives and our grandsons' lives, and bring it on. Well, for us, obviously, it's, as you say, it's almost like more of a daily thing or an hourly thing, and it's not even in the same ballpark. And he really mentioned that. He said part of that also makes it so that everything is so much slower. That the entire mentality and the culture is just shockingly different. And I think that's always kind of impressed me, Father, with how trying to understand, and I haven't really tried to understand the Middle East, but just looking at it a little bit, it's so hard to get a grasp on it because it's so different. I think it's hard to actually grasp the differences between them and the Western world.
Yeah, I mean, their mindsets are very different. Their culture is very different. I mean, I think we tend to look at, modern day Israelis and see sort of quasi-white people and think that it's just, oh, they're just like us, but they're not. That whole entire, it's much like thinking like Russians and Ukrainians are very much like us. So they don't think anything like us, really. It is a totally different mindset in the East. Um, and so yeah, it's easy for us to kind of think, well, why this doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense. But it's um it is very much a foreign mindset, and that the reality is that these things of suffering and hardship and death and all of that, one of the strange concepts in Western mindset is that these are commonplace to them. That's a sad reality of their life. That's why when people wonder why Islamic terrorists are able to get people by the droves to be basically suicide bombers and suicide, militants and things like that, it's because it's not only it's, yes, you have the religious aspect, this weird idea that, blowing yourself up will get you 72 virgins in heaven, but it's also that it's a totally, all you've known in your whole life long is suffering and strife and armed conflict and death and everything, and life is very, very cheap to them. And so yeah, it's a different concept, I think, in that aspect to life. But I mean, we look at it and we see what's going on now, and it raises a lot of questions, because what is the thing? Anybody who's paying attention to the news, what are you going to get? For the first time in forever now, well, in a long time anyways, now all of a sudden you're going to get every news channel out there all in agreement that, it's everybody, raise your Israeli flag in your front yard, and we have to send troops. I mean, we already have sent battleships and aircraft carriers to head over in that direction. This is not going to be necessarily the proxy war that, or has the potential not to be merely a proxy war like Ukraine and Russia is, but rather to actually involve American and other NATO countries into armed conflict there, because everybody has to. You can't even question whether or not you should back Israel. You couldn't do that on peaceful days. Now that there's been this attack, you really can't question it in the popular narrative, and so it creates a blinder effect to it. It's sort of, again, it's like you support Ukraine on steroids. And, this is, nobody cared about Ukraine before the Russia invasion, and I don't mean nobody as in, like, I've known people from the Ukraine, and I cared about those people, and I know where the Ukraine is. But if you ask most Americans, they couldn't find it on a map before then, and but so it became a very much a support Ukraine thing without any question of what is actually going on over there. Israel, everybody knows where Israel is. Everybody knows who they are, and everybody knows we're with sort of like that Pavlovian response. We're supposed to support Israel no matter what, and now that's all you see. You see people's Twitter handles and their Facebook things and their, all these things just have Israeli flags on it, and it's you know we need to be the people that can honestly see clearly of a situation, because only in that is where we can find what we're supposed to do, where we're supposed to put our thoughts and things like that, and not let this sort of reactionism or forced narrative sort of take hold of our mindsets. And we want to keep clear-headed and objective and open and honest about these things, and avoid really what because otherwise it just plays into perpetuating the problem, and especially in this case, it's and the things that we will talk about here, don't mistake it to be that I am, against the average citizen or the average human being on either side of these this aspect. We have to look at it from a, they're not the guy who is selling falafel or the guy who's selling bagels in the Middle East. It's not, those people are just average people. Those people are, that's a different part to this. We have to look at it from the, what is the true agenda, what is really actually happening over there, or at least to this early on, can we get a grasp at sort of where this is going, so we can look at it with a critical and observant eye, and keep those things before ourselves. And so I think that's really important to see. So,
And do you think, Father, is there something more to this than just another raid? Because again, as you said, this has been going on for decades. I mean, they've been fighting each other on the Gaza Strip for decades, and it's not really that new. This one, as you said, is bigger. There's more tragedy. There's more lives lost, but there definitely seems to be something that could be more behind it. You hear at least rumors that Iran is directly behind Hamas, and whoever's then obviously an ally with Iran is also then probably some way connected to it, like the U.S. is connected with Israel. I mean, I guess it's probably impossible to answer, but your opinion, do you think it's something more, or is it just a bigger strike that was better done, I suppose?
I definitely think that it's at least an attempt to move towards something more. I think it is a catalyst of what has been building all along. I think those underlying skirmishes are sort of, the general attitude of what's gone on in the area. I do think that there are legitimate aspects as to why the sentiments exist, and to some degree, and also I think that this is something that's also being encouraged and planned and desired by the true powers that are in charge of this whole entire thing on both sides. So just as a way of little explanation as to why is you have to look at sort of the hallmarks of what's transpired. In some sense, um, it has the hallmarks of that kind of neat and tidy reactionary narrative after the fact, as 9/11 would. Um, Leading up to this, we're expected to believe so far we're expected to believe that Israel, who has one of the greatest in terms of power, the greatest in intelligence powers and far-reaching intelligence powers out there, and one of the strongest militaries present, and one of the strongest in protectionary attitudes towards themselves, always being paranoid and looking over their shoulders around them because they are completely surrounded by people that hate them. That we are meant to believe that this large scale attack that took months and months of planning to and multiple state organizations to plan completely flew under the radar. Nobody had any idea it was coming, to the very point that we're not talking about an invading army here that came in swooping in with stealth fighters and radar um, jamming systems and things like that. We're talking about a bunch of people who flew over what is supposed to be the most technically advanced border fence, with motion sensors and weight plates and communication jamming technology and all of these things, that this was beaten by some guys trundling up in bulldozers, riding on mopeds and flying and mopeds and Toyota Hiluxes, and flying over in paragliders. And this was the great invasion into Israel that caught one of these great military powers off guards. Nobody had any idea that it was supposedly going to happen. Yet after the fact that it took place, within less than 24 hours, they knew not only that Hamas had led it, and that but also that Iran had absolutely for sure, with Hezbollah, had backed it by funding and strategic planning and all of these things. It's you can't have zero knowledge of the coming attack and then have all the pieces to the puzzle within 24-hour period from an intelligence purview. And so one has to sit there and go, why was nothing done? Why was it not, even if you didn't know the date, why were you not on your guard, knowing something was going on, and and increasing security in that regard? Or why were you allowing there to be such a downed atmosphere of basically not of disconcern? Why are you on the at the time of the 50th anniversary of Yom Kippur also allowing people to go out in the middle of the desert in a wasteland along the Gaza Strip to have a rave concert without massive amounts of security out there? Why is all this stuff happening? And then afterwards, exactly who the culprits are. It's very much like you have a giant pile of smoldering rubble in the middle of a city, and you have a nice neat stack of passports that are sitting there, that we know happened from before. And like, oh, well, now we know here's the lineup of all the pictures of the terrorists that were on all those plane manifestos. How do you know
Like a
that?
week after, wasn't it? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And
Right.
so it's like, oh, how do you know that without knowing that something was coming down the pike and realizing that it is going to be beneficial? And why do we say it's going to be beneficial? Because you have Netanyahu, who was their longtime on again, off again leader, who for the first time in his life almost didn't win the election to become prime minister again, is vastly unpopular in the region, even to the point that some people thought that the election was actually rigged, so he would win. And in reality, the Jews didn't want him to actually to win the election. And who is somebody of the same irk as your political establishment. He is, the ultimate of war hawks. He is the ultimate of crushing the rights of others in favor of lifting up his own. He creates an apartheid-esque atmosphere in that region in which he has annexed and disposed Palestinians to these to squalor and to poverty and then gives meager rations of rights and provisions in order that they're beholden unto him, because in Gaza, they basically, most people subsist on humanitarian aid. Well, if you're subsisting for your life on humanitarian aid, you are barely receiving what you need to survive the day, and you are completely beholden on foreign powers to be able to do that. And so Israel sort of gives them their daily gruel, and they in turn have to say, thank you for giving us this, because there's no way for them to subsist otherwise. And it's a factor of control, that if I can give you your day, if you rely on me for your daily sustenance, then you will necessarily um, look past the the conditions in which you live in, just at least to some degree. Or was it Joseph Stalin did the old thing where he had a chicken, and he took the chicken while he was alive, and he plucked out all of the feathers of the chicken, and the chicken's screaming and in horrible pain and everything like that. And then he puts the chicken down, but then uh, he puts down food, and the chicken comes up to him and eats the food out of his hand. And that was, he says, see, if they need you for your daily sustenance, then they, you can do anything you want to them, and it's a well-known, well understood concept of, and that's why the welfare state in so many places is so dangerous. It creates this air of dependency and destroys families and society. And that's what essentially happened with them. But in addition to just that being a persisting rate, sustaining aspect, lately there's been more antagonism on the part of the Jews going up um, to that sort of shared holy site and forcing their way in. The Jews have the Temple on the Mount, and the Muslims have the Al-Aqsa Mosque that occupies basically the same space. And it's always been contentious and things like that, but there's been, some additional increased contention with the Israelite, the Jews going up there and being part of that. There's been the aspect of there's been increased little skirmishes and firings into and killing of Palestinian civilians along the border recently. It's not a new thing. I mean, anybody who wants to learn about these things, do a little bit of research, read something like the Gaza Strip diaries and things like that, you can realize these things are constant over there, and in both directions. But but also that it's, that if you've been sort of ramping up a little bit of antagonist type of aspects, then that's an important part. That and these things here, they're hard to find this information now that this invasion has happened. If you kind of look beforehand, you could see these things going on pretty clearly, but now it's sort of all behind the screened wall. But even still, like, regular articles on a few news stations are at least trying to ask the question of how did this happen. And so,
Right.
I was reading from the Guardian today, and it was talking about, that Netanyahu has to own responsibility for a lot of this problem, and that he's been regularly refusing, increased calls towards, peace negotiations and things like that as they've been coming closer. I remember seeing, actually, just the other day, it was only a handful of days ago, in which who was it? Brett Baer interviewed the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, and the not that I trust the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia or things like that, but the one thing I do trust the Saudis to be interested in is power and money. That's for sure, and everything they do is with the interest of power and money and world influence, and so they were talking, and the question was about, working with, American presidents, what is how is his relationship with Biden, how is his relationship with Trump, and he was, basically saying that he's had good relations with them, or whatever that means, and different workings and stuff like that. And he's always willing to work with whoever. And then the question came about, asking in regards to that, because Saudi's been trying to promote this idea of negotiating peace between Palestine and Israel, and to try to facilitate that in different ways. And don't believe it, it's not altruistic in any way, shape, or form. It's because of trade and oil and commerce, so that they could be more wealthy going through that area without any kind of prohibition, and then also having greater ability to sell to people there. Um, and But they were actively trying to support this thing, and he was asked about Netanyahu because of the fact that he was back in power again, and how was his relationship, and can he work with him? And he sort of demurred on the entire question altogether. He put it sort of in a way that said that he's willing to work with whoever is in power over there, and try to promote this and that if Benjamin Netanyahu wants to talk, then he's here to live, to do so, and things like that. But it was an answer that was sort of, uh there's more answer in the silence, or in what wasn't said, than what was said. And it was clear that if the goal was to promote peace there, this man is sort of standing in the way of the things that would be able to promote that. Um and so it was, it's just some of these. And like I said, I had watched that just out of curiosity, and 2 days later, all of a sudden, the invasion happens, and it's like, well, what the this is what we were just talking about, that it's, that this idea of peace. And that's the part where, Iran and Hamas come in too. Is, I think that their mindset is to, um obviously, Palestine is not going to be Israel. There's no way. But I think and even with the backing of Iran, at least, it's because of largely just a financial and strategic backing, sort of a secretive backing. They're still not going to beat Israel, especially if all of the other foreign powers get involved. But what they want to do is to create a reunification of the Arab world against the Israelis. So on the one hand, you have the Israelis trying to basically force and dominate everything that takes place Jerusalem and Palestine and all of that, and trying to subjugate the Palestinians or push them as to the furthest point of irrelevancy as possible. And then secondarily, you have the Arabs, the Palestinians, the Iranians, and the rest of that are trying to force the hand of the Arab world, the Muslim world, because at the end of the day, the way it theoretically should go is that regardless of what else is going on, those of quote unquote the faith of Islam should support each other against the infidel. At the end of the day, they might disagree on various other things, but that should be the unifying factor. And that I think their hope is to get others to come in and back in this, which again has only the expectations and potentiality of blossoming into a much larger conflict um, uh, than just two warring sides that never have gotten along getting less along again. And so I think that's a really telling aspect, that there's sort of almost like this desire to reunite the Islamic world against Israel and against the West, basically, as a as the many times they're referred to, the little Satan and the great Satan, Israel and the United States, and they know that by provoking the attack against Israel, it will drag in the United States. And I think there's also that connection that they look at the United States and realize we're weaker than we've ever been before in our entire lives. Weaker from a point of leadership, monetarily weaker, public view in the world weaker, all of these things. Even our own public, obviously, so many people are so disenfranchised and just right, and rightfully so, angry at all the establishment as it is. What better time to try to make that push than now, when you have your enemy sort of distracted and weak, and shipping off billions upon billions of dollars to places like Ukraine, or trying to do sex education and transgenderism and the Congo, and whatever other massive amounts of waste of money that we have all over the globe to do these things. Now's the time to sort of come and get them. So that's sort of the way I see things. I really do see it as, and I think everybody should try to disenfranchise themselves from, like, we have to choose a side. We should pick a team to back on this one. Again, I think it's bad guy versus bad guy. There's no good team in this. It's two sides that are very, very much ill-willed. I mean, you can't say that by doing that dualistic approach has to be rejected. I mean, it's been so ingrained into us, especially here in America. You're either on a Republican or you're a Democrat. If you're a Democrat, then the Republicans are all bad, and everything that they say is wicked, and they hate people, blah blah blah. And if you're a Republican, all the problems are the Democrats and everything like that. It's this Hegelian dualism that is created with a purpose to you can't have common sense. You can't think out where the right answer is. You have to pick a team, you pick a tribe, and
then those teams end up being pretty much the same, right? But I mean, that's a great example in the U.S. I mean, come on, I mean, that they're Republican and Democrat, yeah, sure, that they'll come out and say different things and they'll platform on different things, but what they actually vote for are almost identical. So it really is an establishment thing, and they have created a system where they have to win, because the people in America literally don't think they have a choice. Or, I shouldn't say that. They think they have a choice, but they don't understand that they don't. You're just voting for the same group of people. And honestly, even like some of the same families, the same people that have been running over and over, and their children and their nieces and nephews and their best friends, and they're all one club. and they have been for, I mean, decades for sure. I mean, I don't know when you want to go back to the last time we had an actual president. I mean, I tend to go to
Yeah.
Kennedy, Reagan, maybe. I mean, Trump, I suppose, has some arguments of at least not being establishment. But I mean, it's kind of just kind of silly. But I thought too, Father, that there are real similarities between what's happening in Israel and what happened in Ukraine. And I think it's exactly right. That's kind of, you see, Ukraine becomes this great hero, and they're the ones that everyone defends, and Russia's the bad guy. And that, yeah, I think Putin is probably a bad guy. I mean, he definitely seems like a bad guy to me. He's not a good guy.
No.
But I mean, did anyone look at all about how the UN, how NATO handled that entire situation? It's unbelievably bad, and they were surely the ones poking the bear constantly for years and years and years. So it's like, and I think that's exactly it. And so people are putting up Ukrainian flags on their Facebook page, and now, as you said, it's going to be the Israeli flag. And it's like, well, at least understand a little bit about what's going on. I'm glad again that you came on today to clear that up a bit, Father.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's the reality of it is, it's just because and you can look at it from either side. Just because Putin invades Ukraine doesn't mean that the Ukrainian government and the powers that be in Ukraine are good. No, up until Putin's invasion of Ukraine, it was known as the most corrupt nation in the entire European continent. And we're still talking about like the Ukrainian corruption along with the Biden family here in the United States, that and dealing with all of that. And so, clearly that's not the right mentality to have. Then you add on top of it that yeah, but on the flip side of it, just because it is NATO and the UN and the US, and along with Ukraine poking the Russian bear until they finally invade, and you could say, well, they have more justification than the Ukrainians because they were sort of antagonized into this end. It doesn't make Russia good either. Like
right.
we're not talking about good people. And the same thing here. It's and it's again, to be clear, it has nothing to do with the civilian population. There's good people there's plenty of really good Ukrainians that really suffer from what has transpired. There's good Russian kids that have been conscripted into the military to go and die over in Ukraine for some useless, war. Not saying that. And the same thing here. It's, there really are kids and women being killed in Israel and in Gaza from these back and forth attacks, and there really are crimes against humanity taking place. But the difference is now we have social media and everybody's got a camera phone and everything. Crimes against humanity are I hate to sound callous and cold about it, but it's, as long as war has existed, crimes against humanity have gone hand in hand with them. And
war is a crime against humanity, right, Father? I mean, it's a crime against God.
Exactly.
I mean, almost always. I mean, why do you think we always pray for peace? I mean, there is very, very rarely a good war. Almost never.
There's never a good war. War is always the result of fallen human nature.
Right.
And man's fallen state and man's imperfection. Now, there may be justified war, but there is never good war, because yes, if you were defending your own country, you might be justified in doing so, but nobody says that's really good. It's like if somebody invaded your house and you had to smoke them in the middle of the night, and you killed these two robbers in your house. You're not going to go wake up and go like, well, it was a good day for me, like, no, you're going to say this is horrible, but I'm glad my family's safe, and I'm glad I took care of what I needed to do in order to ensure that reality. And that's so that's the best thing you can say from it. And the reality of it is that it causes far more damage than is good. I mean, just as an aside, as a case in point, we have just as an example, like what happens after wars and what damage it does to the population that fights wars is something that is probably a great topic for another conversation at some point in time. But it's like, we lost something like 4,000 troops or 6,000 troops in the time that we were fighting in the Middle East in result in reaction to 9/11, right? That entire time. In the meantime, more than a million Iraqis died in the time that we had Iraqi civilians had died, and militants had died in the time we had invaded them. And who knows how many? I don't know the number for the Afghanis. How many of them was estimated to have died? And moreover, more than 60,000 um, U.S. military personnel committed suicide after returning home. So, okay, yeah, you need to avenge the 2,600 people that died on 9/11 or something to some degree. But what point do you draw the line and say enough is enough?
Right.
When is the cost more than the price that is with it? And that's what we're quickly devolving into here. Yeah, okay, over 1,000 people died in the initial incursion into Israel. That's terrible, and they have a right in that sense, from a purely outside point of view, just looking at it. If they've been the one attacked, they have a right to defend and to respond. But this is going to very quickly blow way out of proportion to what's actually occurred. And just, I mean, it already has started. And this is just to show again, there is no good guys in this. We want to say, oh, Hamas came in and they were cutting off the heads of women and children and shooting up families and killing people in their homes, setting fire to their houses and things like that. Yeah, it happened. It was terrible, and there's no justifying it. On the flip side of it, what is the Israeli response? Well, they launched rockets and airstrikes into Gaza as a response, and yeah, and what the TV is telling you is, oh, and they're aiming at Hamas strong points and things like that. They've destroyed, I think, at least 3, if not more, hospitals in their strategic missile launching. They're I mean, that's the thing. It's airstrikes. It's planes flying over Gaza with laser guided bombs. How do you hit hospitals in doing that in today's war? You had a situation where the Israelis sent a group message to the people of one of these cities in Gaza, to the Palestinians, because of how close they are, and sometimes the people work on either side of the border and things like that. They have mutual telecommunication between them, and so Israel is able to send out a message, a bulk message, to all the people in this area. And so they sent a warning to these people in the city: you get out of, leave your homes, to get out of the city. There's a refugee camp, here, go find safety in there. And people heed that, and then they bomb the refugee camp. But these things aren't on the mainstream news, but this is what transpires. You tell people to go to the refugee camp because there's a bombing run coming to the city, and then you bomb the camp. That's only civilians. That's all that's there. And then or the fact that they talk about now. So what's the response? These people are the average. Yeah, okay, Hamas comes through there, and there's Hamasi militants that are there. I get it, but these are poor people on the verge of like malnutrition and starvation in Gaza, and the first response within a day of the attack that comes in is you shut off electricity, water, and food to the entire Gaza Strip. And so it's like, I mean, we want to talk about, things in an honest light. These are not, there's no good faction here. The response from Israel is they killed some of our civilians, so we are going to inflict as much damage on civilians as we possibly can. If they want to lay claim, which that's a whole nother thing, if they have a right to lay claim to to the Holy Land, because, well, let's just for the sake of maybe being able to hold out and not get a strike on YouTube. I don't know how we're going to avoid it, but, but just in the vain hopes, we'll leave that discussion to a whole different topic and a different day. But if you want to look back in history, look to 70 AD. Jerusalem was surrounded by the Romans, and they starved the people out. There's a great atrocity. It was divine retribution because of their rejection of the Messiah and the clear destruction of the temple to signify the end of the old law. It was necessary to happen as divine punishment. However, the reality of it is like it was really terrible. Read Josephus's accounts about the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. You will read about how they starved the people out, and mothers were cooking their children and eating them, and they were crucifying people who tried to escape, and that and the horrors that transpired. And now they're doing this to Gaza in response. And again, it's not lost on Israelis that this is because their memories are long and they know exactly how these things transpired. And so, but that's their first thing to go to. Let's increase the suffering of these things. I heard Ben Shapiro try to describe it as, well, it's really humanitarian because they're trying to force them to flee so then they can bomb Gaza without having as many civilian casualties. It's like, if you think the Daily Wire is also like going to be your objective news source, or just like please stop. That's not alternative news. That is, they have some good things, and they, but it's low hanging fruit stuff. Like, you don't trust anybody that you just see on the news as being 100% truthful. And and he's trying to claim that starving and the entire population of the Gaza Strip and shutting off their water supply, crimes against humanity, are humanitarian and also justified. And it's like if Hamas militants are the one that attacked you, why is forcing the general population to suffer the appropriate response? These things are incredibly off-putting, and it's just again, he's beating the war drum of this is the greatest, the most horrible thing that's happened since the Holocaust, the most horrible crimes against humanity. It's like, please open up any book about any kind of conflicts that have been going on in the continent of Africa or over in the Far East in the last 100 years, and this day barely even scratches the surface as being one of the most horrible days. But it's against this special group of people, and so therefore we all must believe this narrative. And again, I'm not saying it wasn't terrible. It definitely was, but this is not, it needs to be put into the this proper perspective, this proper box in location. And again, it's what is the retaliation? When the retaliation is worse, when you commit more grave crimes against humanity than even the aggressors did, you're just as wicked, you're just as evil in that reality. And
well, but if you're the good guys, Father, you can't actually commit atrocities. That's not how that works. But it's exactly what you're saying, right? And it's like when you saw the Ukrainians, had these divisions of full-on Nazis. I mean, like they're Nazis. They're brown-shirted Nazis, like SS Nazis, like openly. And but nah, it's fine. Fine, come on. They're Ukrainian. They can't be bad.
Yeah,
they can't be bad. They're just murdering people in the name of Nazism, but they're Ukraine, so all good.
Yeah, and it's like we send out people to try to round up and to imprison everybody that wore a German uniform from World War II, but nobody talks about like the firebombing of Dresden, and things like that, and the whatever various horrible crimes that we committed in those wars.
Hiroshima.
Nagasaki. I mean, it's war is not clean. War is not, nice. and there's some aspect to the fact that, like, if you're going to fight war, you know what I mean? And it's just going to be what it's going to be. It's going to be a horror. It's going to be a hell. And, the idea that we can put war into this nice tidy box where it's sort of, we think of it as, like it's only soldiers and they all are like marching to a code of honor and everything like that. It's like, no, this is mortal combat. And you're asking people to do things, so contrary to how they've been raised, how their conscience dictates, you're asking man to be more than animalistic. You can't, it's not a switch you can just flip on and off so easily. And so war is disgusting, war is horrible, and it's going to create horrible things to go along with it. And which is why it needs to be, avoided and sought to be avoided. That's, it's the reality of the situation. Like, we can't be pro Israeli retaliation. I mean, you're promoting massive slaughter of people, and that's just, how these things go. But I think it's also important to shift gears a little bit here too. We talked about what is the aim of the Hamas, to unite the Arab aspect of the fighting, to unite the Arab world against Israel, to conquer and eliminate Israel, wipe it off the face of the map, to reclaim the Holy Land, and all of these, important Muslim sites, and to keep it for themselves, and just to get rid of the infidel that is in their land. The Israelis have their own aim too. Now, we sort of pointed at the low-hanging fruit of it, which is the Netanyahu point of, like, not only maintaining power but also bolstering up. Nothing bumps your support ratings up as in a strong armed response to a perceived um, injustice of attack for, forced upon you. We saw it with Bush, right? His poll number. There was nobody not voting. There was no question that, Bush won the first election by by hanging chads in Florida and recounts and questioning the validity of the election, which nobody viewed as treason back then, by the way. So I mean, let's not forget that. But but basically, kind of getting the election switched around by raising all these questions of voter legitimacy in Florida, and winning by the smallest of margins, even after the fact, in Florida, to win that election. When his second election came around, and after 9/11 had already taken place, there was no question who was going to win that election. Nobody actually honestly thought that he was going to lose. It was a foregone conclusion. Why? Because we viewed that we had been attacked by, Islamic militants from the Middle East, and he was right there to immediately send troops in and to do a strong-fisted response to invade the Middle East. And so we all put on our American flag hats and raised our flag up in the yard and put our little stickers on our cars and never forget. And he won by a landslide. And same thing with Giuliani. Giuliani in New York, his approval rating was something like 15% as mayor of New York. After 9/11, he's thrown out the first pitch at Yankees games and has an approval rating over 80%. And so Bibi Netanyahu barely wins an election, and possibly even had to fraudulently, win the election. Well, now Israel gets attacked conveniently right afterwards, and he's going to be, the poster boy of strong arm response back against Palestine, and he gets to hold on to his power. So there's that aspect to it too. And then we raise it up a little further we start thinking of everything in conjunction with, the stuff that transpired in 2020 and has led up all through these things, there's clearly a globalist agenda that is taking place here, because this has all of the possibilities of spiraling into a world war, and then you have, it's almost like two spiraling storms between that and the Ukrainian Russian thing, and I mean it could be the biggest world war coming to head by the starting of these two conflicts, when it all comes mushing together in that area. And so you have this global aim just sort of the globalist ideas that you end up having, all of this fighting on that level, promotes this globalism, promotes, advancement of AI and surveillance and all of these things that go on behind the scenes. And then there's the potentiality of the the possibility of the sort of looking at it. There's the reality of looking at it from what could transpire in the religious sense, which is obviously most important to us, and the eschatological aspect of it, the end times type of thing. I don't want to be like some sort of prophet of doom or some sort of person who's claiming to know when the end times come. I'm not a cult leader or anything like that. But I think anybody who's a traditional Catholic understands that we are most likely living in latter times according to the way things are laid out in the scriptures and private revelations. That's not a question. I also think that that the things of with coronavirus and this the massive push of global agendas and everything that took place after 2020 we oftentimes talked about how that sort of is beginning of laying down tracks of, for the possibility of the coming of the Antichrist and things like that. And this has all of the hallmarks of being a great potential goal of the for the Jews in Israel to completely take back all of that area. So if this escalates further than what it is now, and other foreign powers get involved, and it wouldn't take all that much imagination to see Palestine getting completely eradicated from the equation. And then what? That entire area of the Holy Land is controlled purely by Israel, and the people who live in Israel. These are very much the pro-Zionist movement aspect. And so when you remove the opposition from the field, it allows you to do whatever you want to, which in their minds would be to rebuild the temple. And and these are, and that attempt to rebuild the temple, well, we all know that there's been many aspects of, that clear warning of that being part of that leading up to the Antichrist and, his place of rule and all of these things. I'm not saying these things are going to be happening. So before people label me like a cult leader and a end time prophet and things like that, but I'm just saying that our Lord instructs us to pay attention to the signs of the times, and that's what we have to understand and do. And we have to look at that reality that never, with this popping off, we've never been closer to them achieving or beginning that reality. And to potentially clear that pathway, which I think brings me back to the main reason for talking about doing this show. Yes, it's to keep people's minds open, to keep them from just waving one flag or another. We shouldn't be supporting one side or the other on that, but it's to look at it, and as I said before, the reason why I was going to come back to the date of the invasion being important was it wasn't just the day after the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War. It wasn't just the fact that it was the Sabbath day, so to try to catch the Jews in a lax position. It was the feast of Our Lady of the Rosary, and in which that invasion took place on. And we have coming up in just a couple days' time from this recording, the 13th of October on Friday, which is the anniversary of the last of the apparitions of Fatima, the dancing of the sun in the sky, and all of that. And what is one of the main messages which Our Lady sent forth through Our Lady of Fatima? Not only this prediction of the things to come if Russia wasn't consecrated, which obviously didn't happen, and so therefore, we faced down the consequences of that, the spreading of its errors throughout the world. But secondarily, what she asked of us, the common man, is to pray and sacrifice, most especially to pray the rosary and to pray for the intention of peace. And so when we are looking for something to do in response to all that's going on, watching massive amounts of news doesn't do anything to benefit us or the situation whatsoever. Watching, drinking in one news source's Kool-Aid, whether it be CNN or Fox or the Daily Wire or the Hill or New York Times or whatever it is, choosing your source of poison to drink from isn't going to do you any good. To put on one team's hat, to put on the Star of David, or to fly the flag of Palestine isn't going to do you any good. In fact, it's just showing ignorance. It's showing a lack of critical thinking in the entire situation. But rather, if we want to do something demonstrably good, it shouldn't be supporting the escalation of the war. Send them weapons, send them money, send them troops, send them aircraft carriers and fighter jets, and let's ramp up the storm. It should be dropping to our knees, grabbing our beads, and storming heaven for peace, just as the Blessed Virgin Mary asked us to. That's where good is going to come. Because, like we said, the people at the top of running the agenda on both sides, the people from, Hezbollah and Iran, and the people running Hamas and things like that, they're wicked. But just as much, the people running Israel and that whole entire Zionist regime and their political aspect, and NATO and the UN and all of that, they're just as wicked too. The people who suffer are the guys and men and women who are just trying to go about their daily business and live their lives. And that reality that's the people that we should be pulling for. The reality of it is that this is the Holy Land. Neither one of those factions should have any claim to it. It should be part of Christendom. Now, we can't expect that to change anytime soon, but the reality of it is that there are two illegitimate claimers to that land. And this is the birthplace of Christ, the Messiah of the world, the Redeemer of mankind. And this is all that is that we read about in the scriptures. It all took place in this area, and our desire needs to be first for restoring peace, and then for looking for the spread of the faith. And those two things right now we are primarily going to only be able to achieve by divine intervention, and that comes from an answer to our prayers and things like that. And so if you're looking for something to do, it's not changing your emoji or putting up some sort of stupid meme supporting one side or the other. it's to grab your rosary and hit the ground. I mean, CMRI is doing their Fatima conference that weekend, I believe, right? And
This week.
so so that's that is for those who are able to attend, I think you have to book in advance for that. So so those who are going, but if you are one of the fortunate ones to be able to go to the Fatima conference, then it shouldn't, yeah, you're going to have a good time and be with other Catholics and have a lot of a nice experience, but don't miss the ball that this is a real opportunity to do some real spiritual good by being there for a real necessary cause. If you're here at St. Gertrude's or at our church at St. Hugh of Lincoln, we do the all 15 decades of the rosary and a rosary procession, public rosary procession, on the days of the apparitions of Fatima, all the from May through October the 13th of those times. So, and of course, the October 13th being the biggest of them all, it's the one that's the sort of the culmination of it all. So, if you're at one of our churches there, join us in the evening for the rosary. And if you're not at either of those places, if you have a priest ask him if some public rosary devotions can be done in honor of Our Lady's request for Rosary for Peace, just in the chapel. Or if you don't have that ability, there's nothing preventing you from doing it on your own at home. You just we unite ourselves in that prayer, not just for one day either. We continue on doing so, but when you're looking where to turn for these things, it has to be, we have to turn towards heaven. So,
well, and it struck me, Father, that the 7th too was the anniversary of the Battle of Lepanto. So it was originally Our Lady of Victory, and it kind of struck me that I think it was much later on. I believe it was changed to Our Lady of the Rosary. I forget. I listened to a podcast I think my mom did recently, but it's fascinating because I think that it was the victory was attributed in large part to the praying of the Rosary, right? If I remember the story right, please correct me if I'm wrong about that. But
entirely.
I think that's the case.
Yes, it was the Christian. There's a naval battle, and as a real sort of short summary of it is that the navy of the Christian, which I think was largely based out of Spain for that point, that was the Christian naval fleet, was to face off against the Turkish, the Moorish naval fleet, the Muslims, and they knew they were vastly outnumbered, and there was no natural expectation of victory to happen. And so Pius V commanded all of Rome to collectively pray the Rosary for the battle to be victorious, and they did. The entire city of Rome joined together in doing that devotion. And at a certain point, he was given a vision about how the Catholic fleet had won and had actually been victorious, and the prayer had been answered. And sure enough, days later, message reaches him that is exactly what had transpired, and it was not even like a close thing. It was an absolute rout of the Muslims. And so we're foolish to think that prayer doesn't work. We're foolish to think that things are beyond the scope of God and his power. We're foolish to think that we can't, bring mercy upon ourselves and blessings upon ourselves when we are faithful. That's the very purpose of our faith. People always want to seek to find to do something, and they always look at praying as like, well, yeah, we pray, but what am I going to do? What am I going to talk about? What am I going to, whatever. No, praying is doing something. Praying is the primary action. And in this case, when we look at global politics, I mean, really, it's, almost the entire action that we can take part in. And so that's where we need to put our eggs into that basket and to do just that. So we are in some ways we think of ourselves as such a small group because we're, it's sort of like a remnant group of people with the true faith as traditional Catholics and all of that. But think of it in the eyes of God, that He's going to look and how much of a percentage of that group that knows does what they know. If we who have the true faith and have the knowledge that this is the right course of action to take, to heed Our Lady's message from Fatima, to drop to our knees and to pray the rosary and to do these things, then if God sees that, of that small group that's left, 80% of them actually did that, that's a huge amount huge percentage of that remnant few, and He's going to act as if there's a billion of us kneeling down and praying. And so it's important to recognize that reality. No, this is exactly what Our Lady called for. Pray the rosary for the intention of peace. And peace is a good. Peace is an aim worth being worked for, worth being sacrificed for. And so I don't think it's coincidental that invasion happened on the 7th. I don't think it's coincidental that now we have the last of the apparitions of Our Lady of Fatima coming up for within that quick time frame to do. And so the only thing left to be answered is what are we going to do? Who's going to actually follow through with it? Are you going to just listen to this and say, "Oh, that's a nice idea," and forget all about it, or are you going to follow through with it and do the harder thing? But because it's the right thing, you have to ask yourself that question. I can't answer for you, the listeners. I can't answer that question for you. You have to do it yourself. I can do what we do, which is we provide the opportunity here at St. Gertrude's, up in Milwaukee at St. Hugh of Lincoln. Seymour, I can do that by providing the opportunity with the Fatima Conference. Other priests can do what they're going to do for providing that opportunity. And if you haven't plan something out, maybe this is the spirit of I should probably do something for my parish to do that. And if not, maybe you, the parishioner, can be the one to ask to get something going, or whatever. It's don't be forceful, don't be rude or anything like that, but it's important. And everybody, at the very least, we all have the rosary in our pocket, or we should. The least you can do is reach in and grab it and start praying. So
And real quick to comment on that, Father, just because this came up recently, I was in Italy with a priest there, good friend of ours, and we were able to see the body of St. Pius X in his hometown. It's like his home church, which was pretty neat. And there was a big group of pretty much their entire parish, in this little parish of 60 people or so, went to this, to see St. Pius X. And I talked to the priest afterwards, and he's like, it was really a wonderful event. And in a big part because I didn't have to organize any of it. He said, it's a parishioner came up with the idea. They came to me and said, "Hey, Father, we'd love to do this. What do you think? Are you there with us? Are you supporting us?" And he said, "Yes, of course." They organized everything. They did it. And so again, I think that's such a good point, Father, that I think priests are so busy sometimes they don't have the time to even think of these things, or they don't see, I think that's just how it goes. So if you do have some idea like that, if St. Pius X's body is there, and don't expect a priest to always be the one who's going to organize it. I think there's just simply not enough time. So that's a really good point. I just saw that, so I just wanted to quickly comment on it.
Yeah, and as a connector to it, if people feel that urge to sort of just get back in line with the massive sheep following the Fox News narrative or whatever it may be, here's a quote from Pius X regarding this the state of at his time, the idea of the Jewish people wanting to get back the state of Israel. It wasn't even a reality yet. And this is what he said about it: "We are unable to favor this movement. We cannot prevent the Jews from going to Jerusalem, but we could never sanction it. The ground of Jerusalem, if it were not always sacred, has been sanctified by the life of Jesus Christ. As the head of the church, I cannot answer you otherwise. The Jews have not recognized our Lord, therefore we cannot recognize the Jewish people. And so if you come to Palestine and settle your people there, we will be ready with churches and priests to baptize all of you.
Oh, Father, you have to love St. Pius X. Boy, he is absolutely one of my favorites. I someday, God, please. There's another thing to pray for. Bring us a good, true Pope, like our good St. Pius X.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like you look at all those popes, and from of the last whatever, however you want to, far back you want to go. Let's just even say from Leo the 13th onwards, or I mean, realistically, you could trace it all the way back to Pius V. There's a reason why St. Pius V was canonized, and then you didn't have a canonized saint until St. Pius X, right? And when you look at the last, let's say, 10 or so true popes that we had, or at least the last half dozen of them, you had all of these popes that were certainly sound doctrinally, and certainly had sound morally and sound in terms of, and they were extraordinarily intelligent men. They had these great intellects. They were put in all of the best of the schools and all the best of the training for all of the and put in the diplomatic corps and everything like that, and they all thought they could do so much by diplomacy and by natural means. And so you saw the papal states shrink and then disappear. You saw the territory of the church shrivel up and go away. You saw modernists come in and seize control. You saw evil factions gained victory on the day. You saw the church compromise on so many aspects with the modern world and lose a little, one step at a time, lose its influence a little bit more for the doing of good. And you had one shining beacon in the middle of that who was a true saint, because he didn't put so much stock in diplomacy and highfalutin highest tiers of theology and all of that. He was a pastor, and he knew what it meant to take care of souls, and that meant speaking clearly and plainly and using and doing what was right regardless of the consequences. And that was St. Pius X. And so it is that we have to look at, if each one of us wants to have like a little piece of St. Pius X in us, then it has to be not being duplicitous. We have to be honest with, and that means seeking truth no matter how inconvenient it is to find. Looking at this, you're going to be the only one in your neighborhood who's sitting there saying like, no, we shouldn't be supporting Israel probably in this war. And that means you're going to be probably unpopular, but it's not, because it's not based in truth and reality. It's where the truth lay. You'll be the only one doing the things that are actually going to benefit the actual human beings on the ground and the world as a whole. You'll be the only one praying the rosary and making little sacrifices and storming heaven for it. You'll be the only one who actually cares about souls and cares about humanity and cares about these things. So, that's where truth lay, and oftentimes it's lonely and it's unpopular, but who cares? We have to have the gumption to just say it as it is, and that's what we're here to do. Is Palestine's not good, Israel's not good, Almighty God is good, and Our Lady is good, and peace is good. And that's what we need to work for.
Amen to that, Father. I think that's a perfect way to wrap it up. Thank you, as always, Father McKenna, for coming on and telling us how it is, telling us the truth. I always appreciate it, always enjoy it. I hope all of you did as well. Please like, share, subscribe, comment. We'll see if YouTube lets us keep it up. You never know with these types of topics. As Father said, they can be a bit dicey. I think it'll be all right, but we'll see. If not, we do have a side channel over on Rumble, which should publish it as well. If that doesn't happen, then contact me, Kevin89Davis@gmail.com, and remind me that I need to put it up on some alternative source. But don't worry, if it gets kicked off YouTube, I'll make sure it gets up somewhere. Father, thank you so much as always for coming on, and I'm looking forward to the next one. Until then, God bless.
Likewise. Thanks.